Hi, everybody. It's Chap. Thank you so much for checking out Cutting the Crap with Chap. I'm super excited to be here with an incredibly experienced educator, Miss Barbara Gruner. And we are going to be talking about unwrapping the present and connecting by heart. Barbara, how are you doing?
This morning. Thank you so much for having me on.
Of course, we're gonna have a great time. And I still, it's amazing to me you've been at this for 40 years. So kudos to you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, so as we get started, tell us one thing that makes you special.
I think it's my energy.
Okay, I can see that. You got a lot
Yeah.
of energy, a lot of positive energy.
Thank you.
And how about if somebody said pick one word to describe you, what would it be?
Yeah, that's so hard because that whole one, I want like five.
You
I'm
can,
going
you
to
can.
go with loving because I think once you have that connection with love, then all those other things fall into peace. Empathy comes along, joy is there, hope is present. So I'm going to go with loving.
Oh, I mean, how can you go wrong with that? It's such a good word. And you're right. I love how you kind of spun it into the kind of like the empathy piece
Mm.
because people always talk about empathy, it's like one of these words where you hear it so often, but I think people struggle with it greatly. um and I can say, like, I know I have, because a lot of times my wife will say, oh, you're not being empathetic, and I think I am, but I sometimes maybe am not as much as I should be. So um you can chime
Yeah,
in.
I dug into that word after I saw Michelle Borba speak years ago, maybe like in '08. And I was like, whoa, why haven't I been teaching this more actively? Because we're hardwired for it, right? But it doesn't happen by chance. And so we have to intentionally like figure out what is that other person going through? What do
Mhm.
they want? What do they need? And that might be by switching places and imagining that were me, or it might just be by holding space and listening, which is sometimes really hard to do because you don't want to listen to understand. The natural inclination is listen to respond. Oh, my turn. And I can say, I can make a connection. I can say, but sometimes that's not empathy, right? If I jump in with my connection, am I really hearing you fully? And so it's tricky. It's not easy, but we're hardwired for it. So it should be natural if we can elevate it anytime possible, anywhere possible, in any way.
You
So
know what, you're so, it's so funny you said that, because that's so true. So we're both educators, right? And when you're an educator, you're a talker.
yeah.
You just are. I don't care what you're teaching and how long you've been teaching. If you are in the field of education working with kids, you are a talker. And again, there's levels of it. Some people are much more like that. I mean, I know I get joked about all the time. Like, so I've been fortunate where I teach at that I've been able to speak to students before they graduate.
Oh,
I'm
yes.
I've been really fortunate, and every year the people that run it, they'll be like, Craig, you have 7 minutes.
Yeah.
and and I sometimes I'm under the seven. It's not often, but we're just talkers. I mean, it's just kind of like, and I think you're you're really spot on, Barbara, with the listening piece. You know, and I think what can help us is just pause. Take a pause. Like when somebody's talking to you, like just listen. Like really listen. I'll say to students all the time, you're hearing me, but you're not listening. Like, and that's something that's critical. Like, there's a very big difference between hearing what somebody's saying and really listening and taking it in.
Yeah. When you get to the level of feeling with, then you know that that pause is kind of working. In my practice as a school counselor, I would in my head say the word wait. And wait stood for why am I talking? WAIT. Because I would want to
uh,
jump in and solve at first. I want to jump in and solve. Oh my gosh, I had that same problem. Or, oh, my mom, my dad, blah, blah, blah. And there's a time and a place for that, for sure. Those connections are important, but not when they're in the middle of their story feeling all those feels. And so I literally had to remind myself, it's not my turn, it's their turn. And my job, hold space, be present, connect with them at a deeper level right now, connecting by heart.
hmm. Barbara, first of all, I just came up with the title of our podcast.
Yes.
why, why am I talking?
Oh.
Love that.
Wait.
That is so good.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to use that. That's good. So Barbara, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Craig. I was born on a dairy farm in the Green Bay, Wisconsin area. Go Packers. And oh, wait, are you a Steelers fan? Anyway,
No.
I love the Steelers, love the Steelers. And I spent the first 24 years milking cows on my family's dairy farm. We had 250 cows when I was a kid in a herringbone milking parlor doing 16 at a time. And so I would milk the cows before school and then again after school. That's where I got my work ethic. And of course, we wanted to be watching TV like the rest of the kids, but at the end of the day, it was really such great character training because you can't make a living off the land without really having some deep seated, pardon the pun, character traits, right? Responsibility, citizenship,
Right.
respect, all of those things. Went to a parochial grade school, public high school, went to UW Madison. Along the way, a young man from Mexico came to work on our farm, so I decided to learn Spanish, and I ended up becoming a Spanish teacher with an English degree out of Madison. Came down to
Wow.
Texas to teach Spanish, taught Spanish for 10 years, moved into school counseling, did that for 25 years, took a retirement at that time just so that I could play around a little bit. I worked with Character Strong and was the lead writer on their Purposeful People curriculum. There were a couple of us lead writers. And then in an unbelievable twist of fate, I got to go back to the classroom, Craig, and I got to teach Spanish again for 2 years
Wow.
after COVID. So I am just wrapping up my 40th year. This last year, I got to do triage in our district. I was a little bit like a sub, but whenever they needed somebody with a specific skill set of Spanish and or counseling skills, they would bring me in and plug me in. And what a beautiful way to end my in-school career. That's where I
Wow.
am today.
That's amazing. That is, it's so great to talk to an educator who has taught and been involved in education for 40 years because, and I say this all of the time, there are far more people that have given their career to education that really like it than those who don't, except we don't hear that because it's not sexy. You know, like if
Well,
somebody's listening to. No, go on, please.
the people who don't like it are so noisy about that, right?
Right.
It's so
Right.
easy to complain. It's so easy to complain. But we have the job of holding the hearts of our future, right? Talk about powerful, and not in a way like, oh my God, I'm the CEO of something. Powerful as in, this is meaningful work and this matters. This matters not for just now. And sometimes I think, how long will it matter, right? How long will it matter? Well, I had a kid in my Spanish class years ago, let's say 1989. I don't know. Didn't care much for him because he was not there to learn Spanish. He was one of those typical redheads and he was there to goof off. I don't like to stereotype, but sometimes the redheads had my kind of energy. Anyway, it's 30 years later, Shap, and he sees me in the Supercuts getting a haircut. He walks in, he's like, oh, dude. I said, David, David, because that's what I called him. And he said, man, I didn't really learn anything. I didn't even like your class. I said, duly noted. I had that, kind of figured out in my head. And he said, but I do remember this, and I'm not making this up. That kid stood in front of me at the Supercuts and sang his ABCs in Spanish flawlessly. Now, a third, let's see, 30 years later, and he's 18, like a 40-year-old, let's say 45, I don't know. He's a man now. He's a dad. He works at NASA. He's a photographer. A grown man who still
Yeah.
feels safe enough to sing his ABCs with me at the Supercuts in Spanish. I don't know. Like, that's empowering to me. That's how long will it matter? Who knows?
But you also did something there. You mentioned something that's critical for those in education is you found a bright spot. And this is really critical. Is if you are getting in the education field or you've been in the education field for a long time, there are going to be some difficult moments. Um, there
A
just
lot.
are. I think exactly. It's going to be a lot, but there are going to be way more really positive moments. And it is our job to spend way more time focusing on the positive moments than the difficult ones. I'm not suggesting that we ignore the difficult ones. That's not the point. The point is that if you are spending so much time harping on the difficult moments, you forget those really meaningful, positive ones that impact kids and your own life. And what you just talked about with David is that moment where even though this student did not enjoy the class, 30 years later, that student is recognizing you and mentioning that they learned this. Like, that's such a powerful moment that we all need to kind of embrace. And I've had students, so I live and teach in the same district.
Oh, that's
So
fun. Yeah.
I see I see students all of the time that are, you know, in my district. Literally last night my wife and I were walking on the same neighborhood walk that we do almost every night. It's a 2 mile walk. As I'm walking, we walk past one of our neighbors who lives like about a mile away. And we said, hi, good evening. And they're like, hi, good evening. And so we love the outside of your house. It's really pretty. We started to talk. And she's like, you're Mr. Shapiro, right? And I'm like, I am. She's like, yes, I thought so. She goes, you look the same as you did 20 something years ago when you were my teacher. And I
Wow.
was like, oh my God. And she's like, hi, I'm Jennifer. And I remembered her, and she's like, you had such a positive impact on so many of us. And it was really just one of those moments where I didn't recognize her. I mean, I had her 20 something years ago. She was a kid, but she kind of recognized me and was, talking about it. And I think that really is just critical, just for our jobs.
I think you just came up with the title of our podcast. I know we talked about weight, but when you just said those four words, five, when you were my teacher, I think about that so often. Like, what will kids say to fill in
Mm,
that response? When you were my teacher, how did
I
they
like that. That will
feel?
be the title.
How did they
That will
feel?
be the
What
title.
do they remember? Yeah, when you were my teacher. And there are some that don't want to hear the the rest of that from us. There are some, but again, without swaying the way of toxic positivity, I'm fine, everything's fine, I'm fine. when you're really authentic and you're able to say, you know what, I'm not fine. We just went through a Hurricane Monday. We're not fine. A million, 2 million of us don't have power. We're not fine, but we're alive. And how do we respond? We get to choose to respond with positivity. Sure, we lost a couple of trees, but we had trees to lose. Like, that's not toxic positivity. That's, I'm going to gratitude. I'm going to something uplifting. The storm has passed, and here we are. Now what?
But how do you?
Right?
But how do you? So when I've had other people on, one of my questions that I would say to you, because I'm just listening to you, Barbara, and we were chatting before we came on the podcast. You are a naturally upbeat, positive person. Would you say that's true?
Yes.
So when I hear you speaking, one of the first things I'm thinking about is you're talking about gratitude and we had this hurricane, but you're alive, and we lost the trees, but we have everything else. I'm going to go back to spin it back to the education piece. How do you think that we can get educators, and it even doesn't have to be educators, it could be just people in general, to see the brighter version of things instead of seeing things so dimly?
Okay, so my dad really helped me with this, and it goes to Aunt Norma before him. His aunt, my great aunt, was my first and second grade teacher in that parochial school I talked about. And I had the beauty of, she's my aunt during the nighttime, but during the day, she's Miss Natsky. And her secret seemed to be to find something that she liked about us, right? Find a way to make her our favorite. And so I ended every day with, what was my favorite thing? I would end with my kids, what's a highlight? And one time my son said, I like highlights better than low darks, because I used to be like, what's one thing you could work on for tomorrow? And it got him kind of down, because there's always that one thing you can work on for tomorrow. But let's start first with a gratitude. What's one thing that was your favorite about today? Because the small things end up becoming the big things. And so when I had this student named Drax, I didn't like anything about him. I thought his name was kind of goofy. I'm like, Drax, what is that? I'd never heard that before, and of course there was no Spanish equivalent. And I'd call my daddy up, Daddy, if my classes would be perfect if only I didn't have Drax, which was awful in hindsight, right? But my dad would say, find something that you like about him. Find a way to make him your favorite just while he's in your presence. I said, I like his sister. Does that count? It's like, no, ma'am. So I tried so hard. I even offered to tutor him before school, which that was out of my comfort zone, because I'm like, if he can't get it during the class period, why would his mom send him early, right? Spend extra time with me. And he was really one of my early teaching lessons, because he got away without, I found something to make him my favorite. I, I didn't win. I didn't win with Drax. He did pass Spanish because he came to tutoring, but we didn't really see eye to eye. When I started doing my character work, I said, okay, if I ever see Drax again, and I was telling this to people, this was my story. If I ever see Drax again, I'm going to apologize, because I was the adult in this situation and I needed to find something, some way. Did he have a puppy? Like, I never dug into anything. All I knew is he didn't like Spanish. He didn't care for me. I wasn't his biggest fan, blah, blah, blah. Loved his mom, loved his family. I kept running into his mom. I'm like, God, could you send me a bigger sign? Okay, now it's 20 years later, and I'm teaching in the district where I was teaching at the high school, but now I'm in the elementary, but I'm back at the football game under Friday Night Lights because my daughter is in the band. And they say at halftime, it's homecoming. If you were teaching in 1989, please meet the grads on the 50-yard line. And I'm like,
Oh
I'm
my
not
God.
going down there. I was different, right? I had changed. I had my own family. I was, working on being a school of character leadership in my in my elementary school, and my husband's elbowing me, right? Brune, go down there. I'm like, I'm not going down there. Those kids are like 38 now. I won't even recognize them. Then I hear the guy from the booth. If you were a teacher, like he's staring right at me because, of course, he was in my Spanish class, small district. I go down there and I'm talking to people and I kind of recognize some of them, right? We're getting hugs. And then I see this kid and I reach out my hand and I'm go, Hector, because that was his Spanish name. And he goes, dude, it's Drax. So I am on the 50-yard line with
Oh my
Drax.
God.
And in my head, I'm like, did he just call me dude? And I'm like, oh my gosh, Drax. And so I have this whole like Fred Flintstone thing with the angel and the devil. Apologize, don't apologize, apologize, don't apologize. And I hold his hand for what seemed like 5 minutes. I'm sure it was 5 seconds. And I said, I owe you an apology. And he's looking at me so strangely. And I say, oh my gosh, I was not very kind to you. And I was supposed to find some way to make you. And then I'm like, okay, stop talking. Stop talking and just apologize. Right? Because I'm still holding his hand under Friday Night Lights. And I say, I am so sorry. Please forgive me. And he says, dude, I was a turd. And I'm like, be that as it may. I was the adult in that situation and I needed to do better. And so he kind of pulled me into this awkward embrace and he said, I turned out okay. And I'm like, whew, that's my forgiveness on the 50. And I got better because of Drax.
You know, it's so funny, Barbara, you say that because I will have this conversation with a lot of younger teachers, some veterans, but mostly younger ones, and they'll say to me, "Oh my God, Shap, I had this kid in class today, and blah 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 blah." And first of all, you never want to diminish somebody's feelings, so that's the first thing. I think when I was younger, I would have probably said, "It's okay, don't worry about it." That's the wrong answer.
Blow
It's
it
the
up.
wrong answer. It's the wrong answer. You have to validate people's feelings. What I normally say, and it depends on the situation because every situation is different, is I will normally say, you know what, I'm really sorry about that. I'm sorry that happened. That's not right. And then I would normally say to them, do you want me to keep going or do you want to say something? Because a lot of times, if you keep going, you're giving them something that they're not really looking for. Sometimes people are just looking to be heard. They're not looking for a piece of advice. They're not looking to be lectured. They just want to be heard. And that's something that I have struggled with for a very long time. I still struggle with it. Is I'm a teacher. So we're always kind of, we're always giving advice. But going back to what you said, which is critical, is you were self-aware enough to be able to say and to think, you know what, I need to apologize to this student. And that is hard because you are the adult in the room. And for all of the educators that are watching us, that is hard. And you can tell me whether you agree or disagree. I feel that as the adult in the room, you always have to remember your audience. You have to remember that at the end of the day, I am 58 years old. I am teaching students that are 40 years or more younger than me. 40 years or more younger than me. I cannot expect them to have all of the skills that I have developed over 58 years. Now, a lot of them do. A lot of them have amazing skills. But going back to what you said, was it Drax?
Yeah, Drax.
He didn't have all the skill sets that you have now. I mean, and sometimes we have to step back and just kind of remember that.
And here's the thing, you can't give away what you don't have. So
Right.
I'm expecting him to care about Spanish when all he cared about was basketball. And I came into it so excited to teach Spanish that I forgot I was teaching kids
Mhm.
Spanish. And that had to be a metamorphosis over the years. There's that 40-year wisdom, that whole connection before content, or all the all the buzzwords about relationships. Those have to be real, and those have to not just be trending and not just be buzzwords. And I was making a connection with his mom and his sister, but I was missing the most important connection, and that was with him. And in my defense, I was like 25, so I wasn't even that much older than him, but it didn't matter. I was in a mentorship role, and I had my dad as my mentor saying, find some way to make him your favorite. And in that particular case, I failed, but I ended up winning only because I grew and had the gift of seeing him again at his 20-year reunion and being able to ask for forgiveness. Super important, because what did what was the model, right? The kids are always watching us, even when they're 38. They want to see if we're walking the talk. And I mean, I did it because I needed to. For me, forgiveness is as much a gift for you as it is for the kid. But I also am aware that I'm always modeling, even out in the community at the grocery store. Like you said, you've got kids you're walking into on a walk.
Yep. You know what's interesting too is um, I will say that you said something, and I've had this conversation before with people. I wouldn't say that you failed. I don't like that word. I don't like that word. I mean, you can say that, but I'm going to say that I don't like that word. I would say that at that point in your career, you didn't fail. You just didn't know.
Yeah,
And there's a huge difference.
yeah,
At 25 years of age, you didn't fail that student. You just were not experienced to know all the skills necessary to make that connection. There is a huge difference.
yeah.
And I think sometimes we are our own worst enemy, because you made a difference in this student's life, maybe not when you wanted to, but you did, even though it happened 30 years later.
Yeah.
Still did. It's really vital that we recognize that at the end of the day, we are educators. We are not educators in that moment. We are educators throughout our lives. That's who we are. You will always be an educator. Even if you step away from, let's say, the counselor role or the teacher role, you will always have that educator role in you, because that's what makes you special. One of the things that makes you special. You always have that. I can just listen to you and be able to tell your passion for the field. And I guess that kind of would go back to a question that I would have is, I don't want to say how, because it's such a loaded question, but maybe a better way to phrase it is, what can we do to help instill those that passion in educators?
Yeah, so some of it is that natural energy that we talked about earlier that I've
Hmm.
that I've got. But I think when we get away from problem admiring and move into solutions, right? And they don't even have to be like this is fixing things, but they just have to be like, what's next? When we don't get stuck problem admiring, then we can move toward what's next. And those creative juices can start flowing. When you start thinking out of the box, what's next? This kid's coming tired. Oh, how about let him take a nap? Like, I don't know. That's not even out of the box thinking. But when you start looking for solutions, when your creativity can really run its wildest, then I think, ideas start pinging off, and you can find passion and you can find joy. Now, I'm not always joyful. I was hit by a drunk driver 10 years ago, and I had a long dark period where I couldn't find my joy again. And I'm like, oh, is this what life is going to be like? Because chronic pain sucks.
Hmm.
But all I had to do is step back into the schoolhouse 2 weeks later. I was in a wheelchair. I got out of the wheelchair to try to walk around a little bit. And one girl that I was actually walking with, she kind of leans, okay, second grader, leans over to kind of hold me up as I was walking her to her CPS visit. And I thought, that perspective that it could always be worse. And it just comes back to gratitude that I wasn't hurt worse, that I could even step out of the wheelchair. And I think just focusing on the little things that again aren't little at all, but they're big, and the
Hmm.
things that feed your soul. And I don't want to necessarily make this a wellness or a well-being uh, platform, but you can't give what you don't have. We've already said that. So if I don't have self love, if I'm not well, if I'm not doing things that feed my soul, how am I to be a vessel to pour into others? And so finding that thing, even if it's just napping, even if it's that power walk around the neighborhood, even if it's swimming laps, picking weeds. I find it so satisfying to pick weeds, but you have to find your thing. Music. If you don't have a thing, try music. There's so many different genres. Go buy a ukulele and look up the ukulele teacher online and learn to strum some of your stress away. There are so many options for feeding your soul, but if you're not doing it, then you risk giving it all away.
That's great, Barbara, because that's so true. And I actually have a post-it note here that you talk about like compassion and love of self of others, which is so critical. That's so critical. The number of times I'll say to people, you have to separate your work-life balance. You have to. I it's funny, and this is kind of going back to a conversation we had a little bit earlier. I had a student in the fall. So I actually had a student this fall, and I had the same student last year.
Oh, wow.
Very, very tough kid. Very tough. Um, very antsy, always had to be moving, could not really sit still and listen for a while. Um, Disrespectful, but in a way that was kind of like not the kind of kid cursing you out, but a kid that would just not listen, not a good listener. And really a struggle. Was one of those kids that would make a class of 25 difficult.
Ah, yeah. I know the.
So it was interesting. And I kept trying, I kept trying. And there would be times I'd be frustrated. I say his name and come on, man, we could do this. And it's so funny. In the fall, towards the end of the semester, I never thought I was really making a connection with him, ever. I thought it was just a struggle, and things had gotten better. They had gotten better through lots of persistence, really being persistent over and over again, having these small baby steps that we would try to work on. Listen, I understand this is difficult. Let's try to work this. Towards the end of the semester, I think it was Thanksgiving of last year. I go down to see one of the other teachers, and the teacher gives me a rose. And I'm like, what's this? And she's like, this is from one of your students. And it was that student. And I saw him and I was like, did you give me this? He's like, yeah, I did. I was like, oh my God. I was so it was so heartfelt. And I kind of caught him off guard because he like I gave him a hug, and he was like so grateful because I was thinking, I'm like, you know what, I'm really I said, I can't tell you how much this means. And he's like, no, he's like, I know that it's been a struggle, but I know, Shep, how much you care. And that is something that I think is really critical at the end of the day is you do need to kind of step back and realize we are teaching younger people, and you do have to try not to let that one kid or that one situation ruin your life.
Yeah, I recently was at a coffee shop and this kid was staring at me and I'm like, oh gosh, I must have taught that kid and I'm smiling and waving and he comes over and he goes, Miss Natsky. And so this is my maiden name, right? So I'm like, okay, 1988, like right at 90, whatever. And he goes, it's me, Freddie. And I'm like, oh, Freddie. And I jump up and I hug him. And I totally remember Freddie. And he played the Music Man. He played Harold in the Music Man. And great kid. He brought so much great energy. And he goes on to say now that he's doing, ministry. He's like a DCE with youth. And I'm like, oh, that's perfect for you. And they need your energy and your joy. And he says, I just came over to tell you that I know it's been so long, 30 years, because I think this was 2019, right before everything hit with COVID. He said, I just want you to know that I can still see your classroom. I can still see where I'm sitting and I can still feel how you made us feel.
Oh my God, that's so powerful.
Oh, Shap, when he
That's
said that to me, okay, so when I was your teacher, now what fills in the blank? Like you could write one of two stories.
mhm.
When I was your teacher, you were grumpy all the time, or when I was when you were my teacher, however that would work, because you could do both. I could write a letter to Freddie. He could write a letter to me. And I was able to tell him in the same vein, Freddie, you brought so much good energy to our classroom. Thank you for that. And now coming over and I'm like, can I get a picture? Because I just have to remember that 25 or whatever years later, how long will it matter? I don't know, a lifetime?
Yeah, I mean that, but again, that's difficult. That's difficult. You have the personality that you're able to think back, reflect, and be able to think about the impact that you've had on kids' lives. Now, again, that can be hard because there is a difference between somebody who sees their job working with kids as a job, and then there are people who see their time with kids as a mission. And there's a very big difference. And there is a balance. I will say there is a balance. Um, and you have to be able to develop that balance. Like some people, I have worked with educators who honestly should not be working with kids. I've worked with educators that you can see it's their calling. In my experience, most people fall somewhere in the middle through lots of life experiences. And it's our job to be able to really embrace those really positive moments, recognize the tough ones, but don't live in them. And that's something that I see people do a lot. They tend to kind of let those tough moments ruminate instead of really embracing, like you're talking about seeing this student what in the coffee shop,
Yeah, the Starbucks.
you're still thinking about that. That is a incredibly positive moment that happened because of you. It is can be so much more difficult to do that than it can be to just harp on the stupid BS that we deal with.
Yeah, I think we have to look for those glimmers and I think we have to hold on to them like 2019. Here it is, 2024, and I can
Mhm.
still see Freddie giving me that affirmation. And then I have to be able to take that, right? I could have been like, oh,
Yes.
it's no big deal. We were all doing that for you. Oh, I was just doing my job. No, no, no. I was going above and beyond because I felt like it was important. And he was able to remember and come back and let me know that. But when I was hit by that drunk driver, I learned the word savor. Now, of course, I've known the word savor. I'm a cook, so like savory, right? Sauces and such. But the word savor in that, instead of gulping down an ice cream, that you would like really mindful eating, for example, savor every bite, savor the texture, savor the temperature, savor, like savoring, because I was moving so much more slowly and I had more time to savor. Now, John Dewey is the one I think who first said the learning is in the reflection. And the reflection is your time to savor. But if
Yep.
you're not reflecting, guess what else you're missing? The savoring. And so I think that's all wrapped up in how did I love today? My sister says a prayer at the end of the day. May I be treated tomorrow how I treated people today. And
Hmm.
so it's just a different spin on the golden rule, right? How did I love well today? What were my hits? What were my misses? What were my glows? Where are my grows? Because I think it all comes back to love, love for self, love for others. And my shirt says love is the answer. So,
I see
what
that.
if love were the answer to every question? The first answer, what's love got to do with it?
Oh my God, Barbara, that's so good. And again, you're thinking about it like you got hit by a drunk driver. I mean, this is so critical for people. You got hit by a drunk driver, but through your own personality, your mindset, you were able over time to spin that into something where you could savor life. Do you know how hard that is to do? I mean, that is hard to do. That's not easy.
Lots of therapy, lots of prayers. Um, Chronic pain is awful. Post traumatic stress, horrible. If I never have to startle in the car again,
Right.
I would love that. I'm not a good passenger for sure, but I could have died. It was head on. I was broken in three places physically and so many more emotionally. So, like, to be grateful that it wasn't worse, I know that sounds goofy and I was in a lot of pain, but I came out the other side being more grateful, being more mindful, learning, having learned how to savor. And now I go to the courthouse every month and I get to talk to people who are on probation about making better choices and finding healthier habits and leaning on people and simply calling an Uber instead of getting in the car. Like, so many blessings have come out of this. You know how we love to talk? Yeah, I got another speaking opportunity, Craig. So there's that. And they're court ordered to sit there and listen. So yeah, I don't want to make light of it, but if I can just change one heart, if I can just love somebody toward healing, that will be a really beautiful day's work.
The most powerful part of what you said is not even what you said. It's true.
Okay.
It's how you said it. I was listening to you as you were speaking. It was so obvious to me that it was so heartfelt. It was so heartfelt what you just said. And anybody watching it is going to pick that up. They're going to be like, wow, Barbara really means what she says. You're not just saying it. We're having this conversation without any prompting. And you're just talking about that. And that speaks volumes of how important it is in your life.
Thank you. If we have it and we don't give it away, I think that's the shame. You know, we can't give away what we don't have, but if you've been gifted with it, blessed with it, if you've cultivated it and worked on it, but you hide it under a bushel,
Right.
no. So thank you for recognizing that. I think that goes to my energy. Maybe passion is a better word, but just that energy that I was gifted. And some might say ADHD. Absolutely. It was very hard to contain, but it has propelled me to be passionate about my calling.
And you said gifted, which is interesting. What do you mean by that?
Well, I think it's a gift. I think it's a gift to want to pursue helping others. I think it's a gift to have the skill set or be able to sharpen the skill set. I mean, I think I came out of the womb talking and running circles around my big brother. But my Aunt Norma, again, who was my first and second grade teacher, she said, Barbie, you got to be quiet. You just, shh, Barbie, because she had first and second grade side by side in the small schoolhouse, right? 10 and 10. And so I had to be quiet and I didn't want to be quiet. And she had to teach me. So she gave me a little book and she said, Barbie, just write it down. When you feel like talking or blurting out or interrupting second grade, just write it down. Just write it down. And then we can decide which ones of these you need to say and which ones of these you're just thinking. And this is how I became an author. My first grade teacher needed me to be quiet, but writing is just talking on paper, right? She
Hmm.
was a brilliant. And that's how I became an author. I filled up books and books and books, and they became journals, and then they became a blog, and 3 books later, and I did a collaboration, so technically 4 books later, here I am still talking.
And you have so much to be. So this will kind of lead into like so a couple more questions I want to ask you. First of all, if somebody said to you, "What are things that you're most proud of?" What would you say?
I think the first thing is probably my marriage to my husband, John, 33 years. Talk about hard. And it goes both ways. He would say the same thing. Some days I don't even like you. And he said the other day, I'm liking you so much better lately. So, like, you grow into who you're going to be. We have 3 adult children. So I'm super proud of that. And then really leading my school to that National School of Character. And I tried to do it single handedly. We applied 8 times. And by we, I mean me, until someone said, why don't you get a committee? And I'm like, oh, I could have a committee. And so halfway between the 8 years that we applied, we got a committee, because that whole single point of failures, that's just goofy. But sometimes people think they can do it alone. And I
Yep.
was one of those people. My mom said, if you want something done right, you've got to do it yourself. And that's what I heard. So that was my model. And I had to come out of that from me to we thinking. And that was right around the time I was learning empathy as well. So that's the whole me to we thinking. And in 2009, we became a state school and a national school of character. And I think just like if you want to leave something behind, what about leave behind that hearts mattered, that heart before head, that people came to our school and said, it makes me feel like I want to pull up a chair and stay forever. That people said it feels like a public school with a private school feel. That people, one man said, I want to have more kids just so they can come to Westwood. I mean,
Wow.
like those kinds of things, that's a source of pride for me because we worked hard to create that climate of caring, that warm and welcoming thing that said, this is the Westwood way. And I yearn to have those years back sometimes. I know you can't ever go back, but I yearn sometimes to be a part of something bigger than myself like that, as I near the end of my schoolhouse days.
You know what? We're going to have at some point. I'm going to have you back on again. Um,
Excellent. Thank you.
100% because you touched on this character school, and we don't have time to get deep into it now, but I'm going to want to.
Perfect. I
Um,
got to be a site visitor after we earned the distinction, and it is crazy cool to be able to travel around the nation and Puerto Rico and check out schools and see what they're doing and gather up their private promising practices and see what makes them alive for the
mhm.
right reasons. And it's a beautiful thing. I would love to talk with y'all about that.
We definitely will because I'm an SEL liaison at my school,
Oh,
and
beautiful.
yeah, and one of the things I'll say is, man, we make this stuff way too complicated.
Oh, no question.
We make this stuff. I'll say I'm actually having I'm having another guest on later this week who I work with, who is her name is Michelle Gill. She is an SEL coordinator, unbelievably talented. So everybody who is watching this with Barbara and I, when you see the episode come out with Michelle Gill, please watch it. If you are somebody in education and you are interested in learning about social and emotional learning, I can tell you right now, she is the person. She is a person I have so much respect for, but it goes back to the number of times Michelle and I have met, and I have said to her, she's an incredible person. I will say to her, I don't understand how we are making this stuff so complicated.
Yeah, I don't
Tell
either.
people, show the students you care. Teach them things beyond your content. And I'll give you just one example. And I've said this to other people. When I am holding a door, if groups of kids walk in and don't say thank you, I will stop them and make them walk back out. And they're
Good for
like, what,
you.
Shap? No, because they don't know. They either don't know or they're oblivious.
Or they need
And
more practice.
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say to them, when you assume that this student knows, they don't know. Because if they knew, they would do it. And sometimes people will be like, oh my God, Chap, what are you doing? I'm like, I said, I'll tell you what I'm doing. I am teaching these students a life lesson. If somebody is holding the door for you, you say thank you. That's what you do. And I don't want to delve any deeper into it, but I think those things show me a school that has character as its core value, and I will show you a school that is academically improving.
Yeah, no
100,
question.
100%. We have it so backwards so often that people will throw the academic piece up and forget about the character piece. So I don't want to keep going with that. We'll have that for another podcast. Can you tell me some of the challenges you've had? I mean, obviously, I hear some of them already.
Yeah. Parenting is hard. Parenting gifted kids has got its challenges. There's a lot of anxiety that goes with that, a lot of comorbid stuff that goes with gifted kids and the things that they experience. So parenting in the home, of course, recovering from the collision. Sometimes when we're in kind of a affluent area, and so sometimes entitlement.
Mm-hmm.
Oh gosh, I'll never forget the day. Well, you know how much I helped with that fundraiser, so I think Susie needs to be with this teacher,
Yeah.
because like if it's a kindness but it's not a gift, then it's transactional, then this is not a business. I don't know. So like you have to really have some sort of just a lot of patience and just a lot of compassionate communication skills, right? To be able to tactfully say, well, no, thank you for helping with that fundraiser, but that's not how we place students. So I think sometimes with money comes entitlement. For the most part, I didn't have a lot of trouble. I think it was because of relationships first, but also because I don't I'm pretty flexible. Like I don't take hills and die on them, right? I want to hear your side. I want to show empathy and I want to step into your story. And so you're not going to meet a brick wall. There are very few hills I'm going to die on. Trustworthiness is one of them. If you're going to lie to me, I'm going to probably call you on it. And I got in a lot of trouble once. Lady snuck in the back door and I said, "Oh, ma'am, we're not ready for knitting club yet." "Yes, I came in the front." I'm like, "No, you didn't. The front is locked." And I'm like, not going to have this, fight with her in front of our children. But I said, "Well, knitting club starts in 5 minutes. So if you guys will just wait right there, the doors aren't quite opened yet, but privately I probably would have said, let's just be honest with each other. I think you have to carefront your problems, and I did a lot of that. I think some of it is counseling skills and some of it's my dad. He just taught he just taught us well. So yeah, there's challenges every day. There's the kid who's like, make me. I'm like, no, I can't even make my own kids do anything. You think I can make you do anything? But it's deciding, it's a pick your battles thing, right? It's
Oh,
deciding. And I learned that in student teaching. He said, you're going to make so many decisions a day. Let them go to the bathroom. You can't decide if they really need to go or not. Just let them go.
well,
So
that's a
huge.
that's a power thing, though.
Well, sure. But I wasn't really in a big power trip. I mean, no.
No, I don't mean you. I mean that's that. I'll see that, and I will laugh where I will have conversations with people, and they'll be like, "Oh my God, this kid had to go to the bathroom," and
12 times.
I'm like, well, first of all, like, who are you to decide if the kid needs to go to the bathroom or not? I'm like, oh my God, Shop, they went like 3 times. I'm like, listen, I'm not here to debate with you this kid going to the bathroom 3 times. What I am going to say is if you're going to die on that hill, you're going to be dying on a lot of hills. Like you've
Right.
got to be able to pick and I'll say this, like, Barbara, like I am a person where there are not many hills that I even attempt to die on because it's not worth it to me. I have one. Do you know what it is? Begins
Your
with it begins with an R.
Oh, I was going to say your faith, relationships,
Respect.
respect. Well, which leads into relationships.
I
Yeah.
am the biggest believer in how we respect each other. Um, I will say that to students all the time. I have a list when students walk in my room. It's called Shap's Keys to Success, and number one is respect. And I will always say to students that no matter what happens, we are always going to respect each other. I said if I'm teaching you and you disagree with something, cool, disagree,
Yeah.
but
Respectfully.
disagree exactly, disagree respectfully. And I think for teachers out here, like this is something that might really help you. Is you always want to recognize when kids do little things that you didn't expect. And I'll give you an example. When I talk about respect, and I teach at the high school, so I'm dealing with older kids. I will notice sometimes that I don't make kids ask me to go to the bathroom. So if you need to go to the bathroom, just go. You don't need to ask me. You're a teenager. You know whether you have to pee or not.
Yeah.
I don't need to. You don't need my permission. So I will have students. Let's say a student is um sits in the front of the room. I will watch sometimes. So a student who sits in the front will get up and they will not walk in front of me. They will walk to the back of the room and go around and come out, go to the bathroom, come in, go around the back of the room and come in. And I will say to the class, everybody, do you see what Barbara just did? And they'll be like, what, Chap? I'm like, remember we talked about respect? She literally had enough respect for our class that instead of walking in front of me while I was speaking, she took the time to walk to the back of the class and walk around. And that's the kind of stuff that I think, again, those are things that we really kind of need to embrace.
Yeah. Just finding the positives, just affirming those kids. And as you said earlier, it's hard to receive sometimes. And, people say, well, that kid didn't want to be embarrassed. But that wasn't embarrassing. And you'll know your students well enough to know if you can make a public shout out like that or not. But
Yep.
I if we can make that the norm, if we can make those affirmations and those appreciations the norm, things will, you asked about positivity. Things will err on the side of positivity. if we've made that the norm in our character building.
What 100%.
Yeah.
So, before we close up, I have a post-it note here, and we're talking about our time together.
Okay.
So you think about the time that we've spent together. First of all, you are an amazing person.
Thank you.
Really,
Thank you.
I'm really embracing our conversation. It's so authentic that it's unbelievable. I feel like I'm sitting in a store in a coffee shop with you, just talking about stuff.
Oh, that's fun. Thanks. I
Yeah,
feel the
it's
same. But see, I feel like I know you because we've connected so much on Twitter, right? And I watch your
yes,
little YouTube clips and your
yep,
podcast stuff. I feel like we've talked before, but we haven't. Oh, just in
yes,
type, right? Just in,
yep.
yeah.
So people, as we kind of get towards the end here, what is kind of like what do you want people to get out of our time together?
Oh gosh, there's probably a lot of little nuggets. I think,
Whatever you say, whatever you want.
yeah, teach positive, just that positivity. I think it comes from love, and I think it comes from giving love wings, which looks like gratitude, which looks like empathy, which looks like compassion, kindness, hope, and joy. So I think if two people who've never met before can connect like this because we have kids in common, because we have love and character values in common, then then I want to maybe put it out there as a model, like what could, or maybe more of a challenge, like what could happen if you sat down with a stranger, or if you decided to mentor someone younger, because you're not that much younger, but you're a little bit younger. And I've seen you take a couple of notes. So maybe it's mentorship time. And it's coming back at me the same way because I haven't taught high school since 1994 because that was Spanish, and then I got to teach those 8th graders high school Spanish. But learning how to work with teens again, and learning how to interact with them and treat them with respect and step into their stories and listen with intention to understand than to respond. So probably I'm going to go back to, how about staying in the moment? Because we're going probably on an hour already, maybe more. Staying in the moment and connecting by heart, not one sided, because this isn't just an interview, but both ways, like a full circle, two educators connecting by heart because of our love for kids.
I love it. That's great. That's such a good message. If people wanted to get in touch with you, what would they do?
Okay, so I have two blogs. One is called BarbaraGrunerAuthor.com. One is called The Corner on Character, corneroncharacter.com. I'm also on Twitter at Barbara Gruner.
Awesome. You got a closing message for anybody?
It's the empathy piece. Bob Goff says we'll become in our lives what we do with our love. And I tend to agree with that wholeheartedly. I think it goes back to empathy. And the next challenge beyond the golden rule, the platinum rule, treat others the way they want to be treated. Mm-hmm. And that's super hard because you totally have to step into their story. And it might mean asking them, and it might mean listening and noticing and observing and listening some more. And it might be showing up when they don't even know they need you. Like, it's so many opportunities to love and to serve. And so I think focusing on treating others the way they want to be treated.
Hmm. So everybody, I just want to let everybody know that I think I've taken more notes with Barbara than I've taken with anybody. I have about I have about 9 post-it notes sitting next to me of little things that Barbara has said that I'm going to put in the podcast. So you'll see them across the top of the screen at different segments during the podcast. But Barbara, what an amazing guest. I appreciate you.
I appreciate you. Thank you so much for letting me share my story.
Oh, his story was amazing and so many great nuggets. For everybody, obviously, thank you for watching Barbara and I. We hope that the time spent was worthwhile, meaningful, and you picked up at least one thing from our time together, because that's really what it's all about. If you'd like to be on the podcast, I'd love to have you on. You can reach out to me through my website, through X, through Instagram, Facebook. All that stuff will be at the end of the podcast. You'll see it at the closing, along with Barbara's information. But again, we appreciate you. We always finish with a closure. And if you've watched any of my podcasts, what I've said is that in the beginning of my first Cutting the Crap with Shap, I would come up with the closing. And I no longer do that. I always take it from one of the guests that we have. So this is perfect. It's just so simple. Here's our closing. Barbara, please stay on if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
Here we go. Thank you, everybody. Barbara, thank you. Treat others the way they want to be treated. Love it. Everybody, have a wonderful day. Barbara and I appreciate you. We will talk to you soon.
Take care.